During the dead period, Missouri has its first surprise departure in the transfer portal. Let's talk about it. Right now, I'm Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I'm going to talk about an under-the-radar safety prospect that was a relatively early commitment in this high school process for Missouri. Obviously, the Tigers like him more than the consensus. Plus, want to talk to you about a former Kansas City, Missouri area guy who could be a perfect fit for the Tigers next season. Do want to start off by quickly reminding you this episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find more than 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. And I think sometimes it gets a little bit tough for your old school fans to stay energized about the new transfer portal environment. And now that Marcus Allen has decided to hit the portal, the Missouri freshman, one of 5 members of this latest Missouri freshman class, I guess we could start calling Marcus and the rest of those guys sophomores at this point, I suppose. But this is Missouri's second departure here, joining Aiden Shaw, who left to go to Boston College. This one's quite a bit more surprising to me and more disappointing as well. He, as in Marcus Allen, is a guy I really could have seen taking a he's a guy I could have seen taking a pretty significant step for the Tigers next season, and that potential still remains, in my opinion. So I think Marcus Allen will end up getting some pretty good offers from around the country. I'd be surprised if, like Aiden Shaw, he doesn't wind up at another Power 5 high major type of spot. I still think Allen has really good size and good athleticism for a wing. The problem is Missouri was pretty good on the wings for the most part last year. They kind of needed another forward or, stretch 4 type of player, combo forward, whatever you want to call it. The problem is Allen was really miscast, I think, in that role. At least he definitely struggled around the basket to score, without a doubt. Even though he has good athleticism for a wing, I think a lot of that jumping ability needs to start with at least a couple strides. When he's caught up under the basket and has to go off of 2 feet, well, like a lot of guys his size, it becomes a bit of a problem against the 7-foot-tall trees that are often roaming around in the paint in the SEC. But still, for a guy who's 6'7", about 220 pounds or so, even though he doesn't have the greatest outside shot yet, I think there was a lot of promise there. I liked that Allen didn't take a ton of three-pointers his freshman season. He played within himself. I thought he was a good cutter, had a decent feel for the game offensively. And the fact that he was 30 of 34 from the free throw line on the year, what was that number? Well over 80%. That's for darn sure, including a couple of big ones down the stretch against Kansas that helped seal the game against the Jayhawks. So with all of that little bit of history there, it's just disappointing to not see Allen come back in a Missouri uniform and see what he could do in that second season with the rest of that class. So a good reminder that until, the end of this month, basically, last week or so of this month, when the transfer portal window officially closes, nothing is official until it's official. And a running theme I've had this week is let's stop making a lot of assumptions about the portal, because every single year so far has been really different, and this has been as unique as any of them. That's for sure. So when it comes to this Missouri basketball roster, now that Marcus Allen is off, if we assume that those other 4 freshmen come back, there's also four four older players, upperclassmen that we're assuming are coming back as well. Mark Mitchell, Jacob Cruz, Trent Pierce, and Anthony Robinson as well. Plus, you're adding Javon Porter in the transfer portal as well. So that's 9 guys now, even without Marcus Allen. So even though I have to say I'm disappointed that Allen has entered the transfer portal, this isn't a disaster or the reason to hit a panic button by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of people might say, well, if we can find a junior or another upperclassman, a junior or a senior can give us the type of potential that maybe we're hoping that Marcus Allen gives us in a year or two, well, maybe that's a net victory. We'll just have to see what happens in the portal, quite honestly, because it's not just, well, who did you lose? But obviously, as the Missouri football team has proven, like this past cycle, yeah, it stung when Williams Nwaneri and Courtney Crutchfield, for example, entered the transfer portal. But at the end of the cycle, once again, it felt like Missouri was a net winner in this process. So with basketball, we're just going to have to wait a few weeks and see at the end of the day, was Missouri a winner, a loser, maybe somewhere in between, a Is Missouri maybe a Who knows? We'll just have to see. That's the bottom line. Now, one thing I've emphasized over the years here at Locked On Mizzou, and especially in recent days, is that while blocked shots and steals are always great plays, well, they aren't everything in terms of actually evaluating individual defenders. For example, you just can't take the best shot blockers in the game and say, well, these are the best interior defenders in basketball. So I will say this about Jayden Quaintance, the Arizona State product who entered the portal. Missouri was very much aggressively in on him during his high school recruitment. After 1 year at Arizona State, one of the premier defenders in all of the Big 12, though, by all accounts. Not only was he a big-time shot blocker and steal guy, he was an all Big 12 defensive team guy. And really, even more, I think, to the point, when you look at the advanced statistics, well, Arizona State was actually 17 points per 100 possessions worse when Jayden Quaintance was not in the game. So that tells you about all you need to know, I think, over the course of a season. So Quaintance, I think, would immediately, if Missouri indeed is able to secure his services, which for probably just 1 year, by the way, and Quaintance will be recovering from an ACL tear. The word is he'll be cleared for contact in September. As I've said, you wish the best for him regardless of where he ends up. It's a pretty aggressive timetable that he certainly can hit, but also you would expect that really it'll probably take him a year of healthy basketball to maybe get back to just the level of confidence that in that knee that maybe he had before. But regardless, he's obviously a guy that you take if you can get him, if the price is right. I don't know what Missouri's budget is, but the point is, all things being equal, Jayden Quaintance is such a special athlete defensively that if he can figure out much of anything offensively, I mean, you're talking about one of the absolute best front court duos in the entire country with him and Mark Mitchell potentially. And Mitchell, while at this point is a much better offensive player than Quaintance, I think those two together would be quite the dynamic duo defensively. I think Mitchell's a really underrated defender, even if he's not a true rim protector, as I've said before. He can absolutely defend multiple positions, switch, and just be a really solid piece in the half-court pick and roll game and all that good stuff. So Jayden Quaintance, you dig deeper into his defensive game and you look under the hood and you actually like even more what you see. And coming up, we got to get to the gridiron as well, where Missouri has gotten its second commitment of the 2026 high school class, a guy that clearly I think Missouri likes a lot better than his consensus ranking. Plus, the shooter maybe Missouri needs from the Kansas City, Missouri area. What does that mean? We're probably going to have to fight off the dastardly Jayhawks for this young man as well. So let's get there in just a second. But boy, life moves fast, especially when you have kids. Well, thankfully, we have things like Fabric by Gerver that makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in less than 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. We're talking peace of mind, affordable coverage, and beyond life insurance. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. And baseball is back, and so is the PrizePicks action. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, or the strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. PrizePicks keeps every game exciting. And when you're building your lineup, you can take things like, just for example, Aaron Judge to hit more than 1 home run, Shohei Ohtani for more than 1 stolen base. Setting a lineup is so quick and easy, usually takes less than 60 seconds. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It is PrizePicks. Run your game. So Florida safety DeMonte Timms is your second member of the 2026 high school recruiting class for Missouri. The 6'1", 195-pound prospect was recruited by the likes of Ole Miss and Vanderbilt in the SEC. Especially like to see the Ole Miss Rebels, of course, in the suiting. And again, my assumption here is, here I go, making some assumptions. I guess you got to make a few occasionally if you do a opinion-based podcast, but I'm assuming pretty safely that the Tigers probably have him a lot higher on their board than your general recruiting services. For example, 24/7 has him not only as a 3-star player, but the 108th ranked player in the state of Florida. So here's the thing. If you're going to be that far off of the radar, you kind of want it to be in a place like Florida that is known as a hotbed for recruiting, where there's almost too many good athletes for the writers and the podcasters, et cetera, to keep up with down here. So DeMonte Timms, hey, again, he's got an Ole Miss offer. Lane Kiffin, especially sober Lane, am I right? Not exactly a complete idiot. He knows a little thing or two about football as well. So I think this is an interesting ad here, and especially, again, my assumption here is also based on the fact that Eli Drinkwitz has openly been telling us lately, hey, we're looking for production over potential. So if you're going to take a high school safety that is relatively off the radar here at this point in the process, again, only Missouri's second high school commitment at this point for the 2026 class, well, that tells you something. That tells you that Missouri really likes this kid. So good enough for me. And I will say, with just 2 commitments this season, it does seem a little bit to me like it's not just the basketball transfer portal, but to me, high school football recruiting is going a little bit more slowly than usual this year as well. For just 2 commitments this year, again, for the class that's going to be high school seniors this fall, I'd say more often than not, Missouri would know who its quarterback is going to be, for example, in the class. You would have thought Missouri would have probably, at least I would have thought maybe a few months ago, by this point in April, Missouri probably would have had a quarterback commitment. Not yet so far. Nothing to panic about whatsoever, especially with Matt Zollers in the fold, I would say. But, just a trend to maybe keep your eye on. And by the way, 4-star defensive tackle Anthony Kennedy Jr., the other commitment in this 26 class so far. So one young man in the transfer portal who reportedly has had at least a Zoom visit with Missouri is Kyan Evans, who originally was from the Kansas City area, Staley High School to be exact. Looks like one of those kind of classic late bloomer guys who had a bunch of offers from places like Lehigh, SIU Edwardsville, UMKC, that type of deal. So Colorado State comes in relatively late, and really the best offer for Kyan Evans, it would seem. So he's one of those guys who, again, if I'm just assuming correctly here, once again, darn assumptions, but if I'm assuming correctly here that he was a bit of a late bloomer as an athlete, as a young man, well, why do guys have to be punished like that? For example, in the past, of course, in the previous system, if you wanted to transfer within Division I basketball, you had to sit out for an entire season. Why are we punishing the late bloomers? That's always been my question there. I think that's one of the absolute arguments in favor of at least one free transfer, if not unlimited transfers forever. But regardless, with Kyan Evans, he's a guy who at Colorado State not only was one of the premier shooters really in the entire country last season. You look at his numbers, he shot 44%, nearly 45% from three on the year, 85% from the free throw line, even made over 50% of his twos as well. And that's pretty good volume on those three-point shots as well, 157 attempts on the year. So he was putting the ball up and putting it in at a high volume. That's something that should absolutely translate to the Southeastern Conference as well. And after losing, well, Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates, there is no doubt that Missouri could stand to add another veteran shooter in the transfer portal. Interestingly, well, Evans, again, from Kansas City, Missouri, to me, there's no way that the Kansas Jayhawks aren't kicking the tires on this young man as well. Another guy from their area, they're probably thinking, hey, we'll steal him just like they stole a similar player from Missouri this past cycle as well. What was that young man's name? I'm trying to remember. Zeke Mayo? That was it, right? Yes, Zeke Mayo, who is originally from Lawrence, Kansas. You may remember there was a bit of a battle between Missouri and Kansas. Once Kansas came in late, it was pretty apparent that Zeke Mayo was going to go back home, if you will. Much less clear to me, Kyan Evans, where his loyalties lie, if he has any, to Missouri, Kansas, or the other way. Maybe it's just a highest bidder situation. Also could be a who is the best fit for me type of situation. I don't know. That'll be interesting to follow, but certainly Kyan Evans, I think of all the guys that I've seen, all the guards certainly that I've seen tied to Missouri at this point, to me, he's the most interesting one, and the guy I would be most excited if the Tigers got is Kyan Evans, formerly of Colorado State. And for the first time in 58 years, the Associated Press's Coach of the Year is a tie. And would you believe one of them is not Dennis Gates? Well, this is an outrage. I understand Missouri fans probably aren't as excited about this topic as they would have been had Missouri actually won in the NCAA tournament. Hey, I get it. I'm right there with you. We're going to talk about this topic coming up here in just a little bit, and a quick results on Caleb Grill at the three-point shootout yesterday. But I tell you, daylight savings time kind of snuck up on me, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, a 5-hour Energy has your back. And whether you're staying up late to watch the tournament or you're squeezing in a round of golf, 5-hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. And the on-the-go convenience is just the best. It really is. 5-hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed no matter the situation. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find more than 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Certainly, Bruce Pearl and Rick Pitino were deserving winners of this AP Coaches of the Year award, deserving co-winners at that. I got to say, I think Dennis Gates has a better case, and maybe even some other coaches as well. In fact, fellow Mizzou mafioso out there, Garrett Gordon on X, said, "I've seen coaches be excellent in the way Pearl and Pitino were this year. Never seen that. Never seen what Gates and Ben McCollum from Drake, by the way, did before this year. Go from winless in conference to a tournament team in the toughest league a year later. Bring a Division II roster to Division I and win 30 games. That is craziness." I think it's a great point on both ends, especially you think about what Ben McCollum did. Took his own player at Northwest Missouri State, Bennett Sturts, from that level, and in year one takes Drake to the tournament, wins a game in the tournament, wins 30 games in the regular season. That is pretty unheard of. And honestly, what could Drake have done more short of going to the Final Four or something like that, honestly, to win that award? So I think it's a good point, and I think it's a great point about Missouri and Dennis Gates too. Unfortunately, no one cares because of how Missouri's season ended. Whether that's fair or not, I'm not really sure. I do think that defensively, by the way, how Missouri finished the last month or so of the season, some of that is definitely on Dennis Gates, but at a certain point, when the strategy was basically, hey, let's spread them out and drive, at a certain point, Missouri didn't have the right personnel to counteract that. So you can say that Missouri should have recruited better defenders, that sort of thing. But, in college basketball, everything is a trade-off for the most part. You're not going to have excellent defense and excellent offense unless you are the elite of the elite of the elite. And even they will occasionally have a guy out there who can't shoot, can't defend, whatever it might be. Basketball, a game of trade-offs, as I've said a billion times. And unfortunately, while Caleb Grill didn't finish the season as hot as we would have liked either, well, we'll certainly trade off and take the season that he did have. He got second place in the three-point shootout in San Antonio yesterday, for those of you who missed it. And I did see one relatively prominent Missouri person out there, said in his profile anyways, formerly with CNN and Bloomberg, that type of deal, who said, well, Caleb Grill couldn't make a shot the last month, and now he does this, just sort of snarkily or whatever, which I thought was uncalled for, to be honest with you. I think anybody who's ever followed basketball closely knows that, well, there's nothing more variable than the three-point shot, even for the greats out there. And in fact, I can remember back in the 2021 NBA season, in December, Stephen Curry had probably the worst shooting month of his entire career. He was shooting 40%, not from three as he usually does, but 40% from the field for an entire month, by the way, of NBA basketball, which is a bigger sample size than a month of college basketball. So a lot of people at that time felt like, well, this could be maybe Stephen Curry is on the downside of his career there. Well, then one season later, what happens? The Golden State Warriors win another NBA championship. So the point here is that let's not overanalyze a few weeks of maybe subpar shooting, certainly was subpar by Caleb Grill's standards, and act like, I don't know, he let Missouri down or something like that. That's just, to me, Grill left it all out on the floor for Missouri this season, and we owe him a lot more. We owe Missouri, as Missouri fans, we owe Caleb Grill a debt of gratitude and a thank you, a lot more than we do any type of snark, because maybe the last month of the season didn't play out the way we all would have liked. So as you can tell, that's stuck in my craw just a tiny bit this morning. But hey, you know what? Didn't stick in my craw. Thanks for all of you for sticking with Locked On Mizzou today. Appreciate you, as always, for making this show your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball and find it on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I am John Miller. This has been Locked On Mizzou.